And there I am. There you all are. And welcome back to the creepy commune known as the Dead Hours. I am the weirdo in robes that shouts at traffic and sometimes throws chickens, and future ghost with the most, Vivian Noir. How you doing? So, missed you guys last week, but thank you all for tuning in to another episode of The Murder Corner in our mini-series, I guess it is, on cults and a deep dive into various cult groups throughout history. We covered a wacky one a couple weeks ago. This was actually supposed to be the other group that I covered in that episode, but there was a lot. I think we can all agree that there was a lot in that episode about Om Shinrikyo. There was a lot to cover. So this one would not have gotten its proper justice. And as well, you all know, anyone who has seen the Netflix documentary Wild Wild Country is familiar that there's a lot to this story. So want to get off on the right foot and make sure it gets its fair coverage. So hello to everybody who's in the chat. I'm going to give a brief shout out to names that I see so far. I see Cassie's here. Hello, Cassie. Hello, Dontex. Hello, Conry. Hello, Electric Pagan. Hey, Cody. Hey, Sean. Hey, Mina. Hey, Tamra. Did I miss anyone? I'm going to scroll back really quick, guys, to make sure I didn't miss anybody. Custard. Hello, Custard. Hey, Daniel. Hey, DJ. Hey, everyone. I think I got everybody. So without further ado, that's not how it's pronounced, but it's okay. Let's get started on this one. So this one is really interesting in the fact that it's a very layered thing where a lot of people that are familiar with the basically the way that the leader of this group was rebranded post all of these events don't really connect the two. They've done a pretty good job of like disconnecting this story and what happened in Oregon to the brand that this man became later. So some of you may be very familiar with the name Osho, or you may have at least seen books or seen maybe videos like about meditation and Zen and stuff like that. He's a fairly popular name in the meditation New Age community. Lots of books. Seems pretty harmless, right? Well, there was at least one time that he wasn't. So let's get into it. Without further ado. I'm going to say it like that from now on. It doesn't matter. If you've ever found yourself in the New Age or self-help section of a bookstore, you may have seen his books. Covers in serene, calming pastels with soothing titles like Love, Freedom, and Aloneness, or Emotional Wellness. Each one promising clarity through transcendence and meditation, each one emblazoned with the Zen moniker, Osho. But few know the prior life of the man behind the meditation, the story of sex, fraud, brainwashing, and biological warfare that came before the pastel-colored doses of mainstream pandering panacea. That story begins now. The man who would be transformed into New Age guru Osho began life as Chandra Mohan Jain in what would be then the Bhopal state of British India in December of 1931. He was the eldest of 11 children, born to a cloth merchant. He would come by the nickname Rajneesh in childhood, which means God of Night or the Moon in Sanskrit. A heady moniker to give to a child, no doubt. Rajneesh would live with his maternal grandparents until he was 7 years old. By his own account, this was a major influence on his development since his grandmother gave him virtually limitless autonomy, leaving him carefree without education or any restrictions. This sense of freedom would be abruptly changed, however, when his grandfather passed away and he would be sent back to his parents' home. He was deeply affected by the death of his beloved grandfather, as well as the death of his childhood girlfriend and cousin, Shashi, from We've already got a moment of what the hell is even that? Yes, you heard that correctly. His girlfriend and cousin. I was 3 minutes into notes, y'all, when I read that and went, already with this fuckery. Okay. Starting out of the gate early. Here we go. Yeah. Grammy's little narcissist. Pretty much. She kind of let him do whatever he wanted. He had no authority. Like, his grandmother just basically gave him run of the house, and he didn't have to answer to anything. And that, raising a child that way obviously probably does not reflect well on further adult behavior. So we're just going to go with the fact that spoiled brat plus audience equals cult leader. Cool. Awesome. Continue me. Typhoid fever when he was 15. These tragic losses during his formative years would lead to a fixation and preoccupation with death throughout his childhood and teenage years. During his school years, he proved himself to be a gifted yet defiant student who gained a reputation for being a formidable debater. He seemed unwilling to take direction or to submit to any kinds of authority, no doubt a product of his indulgent childhood. He would dabble in socialism and become involved with two Indian nationalist organizations, the Indian National Army and Rashtriya Swayam Sevak Sangh, but his membership in the groups was short-lived due to his contrary nature and his refusal to submit to any external ideology or system. He would become fiercely critical of traditional religions at this time and would instead invest his studies in methods to expand consciousness like breath control, yoga, meditation, fasting, and hypnosis. He would also show interest in occult studies. In 1951, at age 19, Rajneesh would begin his studies at Hitkarini College in Jabalpur, but his enrollment in college, much like his experiences with social organizations, would become tenuous and short-lived due to his disruptively argumentative nature. Which is good if you're on a debate team, bad if you're just picking fights with fellow students just to pick fights. Also, yes, I was very proud of saying that I had to do at least 3 takes to get that name right. This was a fun one for me with the names. We've had a couple weeks with names that I'm like, how do I pronounce? Okay, we're gonna go with that. Hopefully I'm pronouncing them correctly. I may be terribly butchering things, but we're gonna go with, if somebody corrects me, please correct me if I pronounced anything wrong and you know that is pronounced incorrectly, but we're gonna go with my way of pronouncing it, I guess, for now. Just like Adwa, Continue me. He was transferred to D.N. Jain College due to conflicts with an instructor, but eventually was told that he did not need to regularly attend classes in order to keep the peace in the classroom for the rest of the students, and he was only required to show up for exams. He used this free time to work for a few months as an assistant editor of a newspaper, but traditional life seemed to hold no sway for the young Rajneesh, who claimed that he became spiritually enlightened on March 21st, 1953, while sitting under a tree, much like the Buddha himself had done, in the Bioterrorism garden in Jabalpur. He would go on to graduate college in 1955 and would eventually gain a master's in philosophy and go on to teach as a professor at Jabalpur University in 1960. But even this was not enough. Resisting his parents' urge for him to marry and, in parallel to his university job, he would travel around India giving lectures that were critical of Gandhi, socialism, and institutional religions. He took on the controversial position that Gandhi was a, quote, masochist reactionary who worshipped poverty. He claimed that the cure for India's arrested development was capitalism, science, modern technology, and birth control. Such statements didn't win him a lot of points with the public at large, but gained him a lot of followers amongst rich businessmen. These followers sought insight privately in individual consultations with Rajneesh about their spiritual development in exchange for generous donations, and his practice thrived. From 1962 onward, he began to lead 3 to 10-day meditation camps, and the first meditation centers known at that time as the Life Awakening Movement. After an especially controversial teaching tour in 1966, he resigned from his teaching post at special request of the university. In 1968, a lecture series that went under the title From Sex to Superconsciousness, he scandalized traditional religious leaders and Hindu scholars by advocating for the freer acceptance of sex, and widely became known as the sex guru. Also, are we seeing a pattern here where basically because he's annoying and argues with everyone, he's asked to leave a lot of places? Like Mina said, life hack, annoy everyone at school until you don't have to go anymore. They're like, you know what? It's just better if you stay home. Like, we're all good. You're good. Like, you just stay home and do things remotely. Just show up for your tests, because honestly, we're just over it. So being very, I guess, argumentative and controversial sometimes gets you advantages. Usually it just gets you punched in the face. I don't know. But, continue me. At a public meditation event in early 1970, Rajneesh presented his dynamic meditation method for the first time, which involved the technique of very quick breathing and celebrating with music and dance. In September of the same year, he initiated his first group of disciples, or neo-sannyasins. Becoming a disciple in one of these holy sects usually meant a change of name, wearing the traditional orange dress of more aesthetic holy men, along with a mala that bore a portrait of Rajneesh himself. But rather than sticking to the Spartan holy lifestyle, his followers were encouraged to follow a more celebratory one. By then, he had acquired a secretary, Lakshmi Vakarsi Kurua, the daughter of one of his early wealthy followers who raised enough money to enable Rajneesh to stop traveling and settle down. In December, he moved to Mumbai and adopted the title Bhagwan Shri Rajneesh, and he traveled rarely, no longer speaking at public meetings. The humid climate in Mumbai proved to be detrimental to the Bhagwan's health overall as he developed diabetes, asthma, and numerous allergies. In 1974, he moved to a new property called Pune and developed an ashram, or traditional spiritual housing there in the 2 adjoining homes and 6 acres. The center allowed for regular audio and video recording of his speeches and lectures, as well as printing for worldwide distribution. This would allow Rajneesh to reach larger audiences, and the Western visitors to the ashram increased dramatically. The center would soon include an arts and crafts area that produced clothing, organic cosmetics, and jewelry. This, along with the inclusion of more therapists from the human potential movement and paid therapy sessions, became a primary source of income for the growing group. The Pune ashram was, by all accounts, filled with a chaotic, almost carnival-like atmosphere. The day would begin at 6 a.m. with the rapid breathing and frenzied dancing of dynamic meditation, and at 8 a.m., Rajneesh would give an hour to an hour and a half long spontaneous lecture on varying topics of religion or questions he had received. During the day, various meditations and therapies took place, and to decide which therapies to participate in, visitors either consulted Rajneesh himself or chose according to their own preferences. Some of the early therapy groups in the ashram, like the Encounter group, were intense and experimental. This group in particular allowed a degree of physical violence and aggression, as well as sexual encounters between participants. Conflicting reports of injuries sustained during Encounter group sessions began to appear in the press, and one participant even claimed to have left the ashram with a broken arm after just such a session, being locked in a room for 8 hours with participants brandishing wooden weapons. I needed to finish that sentence before I started up again. So, does that sound therapeutic to anybody? You're locked in a room with people brandishing wooden weapons who are screaming, shouting, wrestling, fighting, sometimes having sex, all of it. Like so there was a movie apparently that was filmed. So there was a film made by a German documentarian named Wolfgang Dabrowny. I might be pronouncing that wrong, but it's called Ashram in Pune. And it was released in 1981, which was, we'll get to that. So there's a reason I'm telling you this story now. So it's like the film was released after they already moved to Oregon. Once they get there, they're not quite there yet. But the film highlighted the therapy sessions that I just talked about, especially the encounter group. And it wanted to portray what the therapy sessions were like at the original ashram in India. So the footage in the film was gathered in 1978 by Dabrowny, and he'd smuggled a camera into the encounter group sessions. And the film was met with shock and concern from their neighbors in, Antelope, Oregon, this little rural part of Oregon with like 40 people that had never seen people in a therapy group, mostly naked, wrestling each other and fighting with wooden sticks. So it spiked concerns that were already existent, and there was already a tenuous relationship between the Rajneeshi and the local Antelope residents. That movie didn't help at all. The footage is intense and like it's grainy because it's obviously shot with like an 8mm like camera from 1978. But it's literally, you see these people like half dressed, some of them naked, running around, shouting, hooting and hollering, punching each other, fucking like animals. Like, it's wild. None of it looks therapeutic. It just looks like the inside of an insane asylum. But the group then, of course, once the film came out, the Rajneeshi claimed that the footage was gained through subversion, that they weren't told that these were being filmed, that he snuck a camera into the sessions and was a violation to the privacy of the participants of these groups. I don't know, getting your arm broken also with somebody smacking a stick at you might also be a violation of privacy. I don't know. Weird. Continue me. Besides the controversy surrounding various extreme therapies, allegations of drug use began to damage the reputation of the ashram. Some of the Western sannyasins were alleged to be financing their extended stays at Pune with funds from prostitution and drug running. And while the allegations pointed to Rajneesh not being personally involved, witnesses said such plans had been discussed with him and he had given his seal of approval on the illegal activities. By the late 1970s, the ashram's audience had also shifted to predominantly American or European pilgrims, and many observers also noted that Rajneesh's lecture style changed at this time, shifting away from intellectual topics and featuring an increased number of ethnic or off-color jokes intended to shock or amuse his audiences. By 1981, the ashram had expanded exponentially, with an average of 30,000 visitors per year, and Rajneesh had asked that a new, larger location to be found to house the group. However, tensions with existing Indian religions and governmental agencies precluded the ability to relocate the ashram elsewhere in the country. On April 10th of the same year, having lectured or discoursed daily for nearly 15 years, Rajneesh entered a self-imposed 3.5-year period of public silence. Around the same time, Ma Anand Sheela replaced Ma Yoga Lakshmi as Rajneesh's personal secretary. According to sources, it was Sheela who implemented the plan for the group to relocate to the United States in order to help the group expand, as well as seeking advanced medical treatment for Rajneesh himself, who was suffering from a number of ailments. On June 1st, 1981, Rajneesh would arrive in the U.S. on a tourist visa under the presumption of medical treatment. A public statement by Sheela would claim that Rajneesh was in grave danger if he remained in India, but would receive appropriate medical treatment in America should he need surgery for the prolapsed disc that he was diagnosed with. But despite the grave nature of the situation, Rajneesh never sought out medical treatment during his time in the United States, which would eventually lead to claims of fraud from the Naturalization and Immigration Service, the fallout of which would only come after the group's controversial time in their new home, the rural hills of Oregon, and a property formerly known as the Big Muddy Ranch. The property that would be their new promised land encompassed over 64,000 acres and cost almost $6 million. It was renamed Rancho Rajneesh, and Rajneesh himself moved there on August 29th. From the start, development of the ranch and the encroachment by these strange outsiders was immediately met with intense local, state, and federal opposition from the government, press, and citizenry. Within months, a legal battle over land use ensued. Within a year of arriving, Rajneesh and his followers had become embroiled in a further series of battles with their neighbors. The leadership of the ranch proved to be uncompromising and hostile with the locals. They were insistent on having their demands met and engaged in confrontational and threatening behavior to the point that the local residents in the area simply wanted the commune dissolved and gone. But that was not to be. No, it certainly wasn't. So this moving into this rural area of Oregon, which was mostly ranch territory, it was all, very small. Antelope, Oregon itself is a very small town of about 40 people, all ranchers. The area that they moved into, very similar. It's a very rural county in Oregon, Wasco County. And there was obviously tension from the start because you've got like this influx of these people who have come from, God knows where. They're all wearing the same outfits, which has to be a little off-putting. They suddenly buy this property, which in the documentary, the residents that they interview that are still there claim that they were like, well, we were kind of, wary of them at first because most small towns like that are wary of outsiders anyway. But they were like, we just weren't sure of them, but were kind of holding them at arm's length. But then they just kind of started coming in and wanting to take over everything. And then, of course, the towns didn't take well to that. They were like, we don't like it when people come in here and just like basically start metaphorically swinging their dicks around and just like, because they had money and they were just like buying up everything. And they're like, okay, we just can't just do that. They didn't take kindly. So didn't start off on a great foot. They said that there was noise from the compound all the time, that they would hear them doing all these exercises and like having sex and stuff like that. That was just noisy. And they were like, their neighbors were basically, they had weird neighbors. You had the ultimate weird neighbor situation in this area. And it didn't help that Jonestown had only happened about 3 or 4 years prior. So this was all really still fresh in people's minds of looking for the next Jonestown cult, looking for the next group that was going to, mass unalive themselves, because they were following some wackadoo. So this was drawing some scary parallels, you have to imagine, at this time with the authorities, with residents, also in a weird karmic connection sort of deal. The daughter of Leo Ryan, who was actually the congressman who traveled to Jonestown, as you remember in our Jonestown episode, in order to look into the concerns of his constituents, and was ultimately shot and murdered by the People's Temple followers. His daughter ended up using the inheritance she received after her father's death to join the Rajneeshi. So she was actually in a cult herself. Then she claimed that the group was vastly different from Jonestown and that her father would have approved of her decision if he was alive. That's putting a lot of words in that man's mouth, so I don't know if I'd go that far, but obviously things were not off on a great foot to begin with. And then they only got worse from there. So let's find out how. In May of 1982, the residents of Rancho Rajneesh voted to incorporate the ranch as the city of Rajneeshpuram. The conflicts with the local residents escalated, with bitter hostility rampant on both sides, and over the following years, the commune was under constant external pressures from various coalitions of concerned Oregon residents. A group called 1,000 Friends of Oregon took the group to court and prosecuted the commune over the next 6 years in attempts to unincorporate the settlement and force buildings to be removed. The group publicly called for the city to be dismantled. It was understandable that this sudden influx of hostile outsiders made locals in the small rural communities nervous. They suddenly had more than 7,000 new neighbors who seemed determined to take over not only the former Big Muddy Ranch, but all the small towns surrounding it. It also didn't help that the newly christened Rajneeshis had set up a, quote, peace force that would walk around in their signature red clothing, brandishing Uzis. They even possessed a jeep mounted with a .30 caliber machine gun that they would brazenly drive into town. Fights began to break out between the Rajneeshi and the local residents. One hunting magazine even declared, quote, open season on the Central Eastern Rajneesh, known locally as the Red Rats or Red Vermin, unquote. That's a little strong wording. So as you can see, things were not going well, and things were not cooling down. As a matter of fact, they were escalating. One of the acts of retaliation taken during the conflict between the Rajneeshi and the citizens of Antelope was actually the bombing of the Rajneeshi-owned Hotel Rajneesh in Portland, Oregon. There was a man that came into the hotel, checked in, asked for a room, brought 2 bags up. The next thing they know, kaboom, boom. There were no fatalities, but the building was destroyed, and the message was very clear. Ma'anan Sheela claims then that at the time, because of this bombing and because of the escalating threats from the locals, that they felt threatened in their own community, and in order to protect themselves, the residents of the ranch started buying weapons and arming themselves. So they would send cult members out to various places to get guns. They would buy up guns. They said the residents around the ranch said that they trained like all day, nonstop. They had these Peace Force people as well as other just cult members, just group members training with firearms for hours during the day. I don't know if it was and nobody knows, obviously, if it was an empty threat of just like, oh, look at, see, we're training, or if they were actually preparing for something. This was basically just a tinderbox that needed one spark for it to explode. And let's see if that happened. Continue me. Meanwhile, the group was undeterred in their efforts of expansion, taking over the entire town of Antelope, Oregon, which they promptly renamed Rajneesh. With tensions at an all-time high, the Rajneeshis were denied the permits to expand and build on a local mountain. This was the tipping point, and this was where the fight got dirty. Ma'anan Sheela, Rajneesh's close personal assistant, who was one of the only people in contact with him during his self-imposed period of silence, would take matters to a whole new level. In retaliation, the leadership, including Sheela, who called herself Queen and walked around brandishing a .357 Magnum, engineered the importation of a large number of homeless people from various U.S. cities in an endeavor to sway the outcome of a local election. The plan was simple. The homeless people would be brought in to vote for the members of the Rajneeshi who were running for state government positions. But the attempted sabotage would ultimately fail, as the state refused to allow the vagrants to vote. So the group claims that they brought in these homeless people because they went to multiple cities across the country. They went to Washington, D.C., Dallas, Chicago, Los Angeles, San Francisco. They went everywhere. They took buses and they went everywhere, and they parked a bus and they said they went to missions and things like that and just grabbed people off the street. And they're like, hey, we have this place where you can come and live. and you don't have to pay anything. And they basically pitched it to them. So they got all these homeless people on buses and bussed them up to Oregon, 7,000 of them. They claimed that it was because they were looking to grow their group and they were looking to expand and share Rajneesh's message of peace, love, whatever. But on the back end, there was also the benefit of, well, if we bring all these people in a massive amount, we're going to easily outnumber the registered voters in the area. So we can take over whatever we like. We bring in 7,000 people. There's not even 7,000 people in the whole freaking county. So this was some bibbity bobbity bullshit. Sorry about it. Like, there was definitely an ulterior motive at work here. But of course, like I said in the video, it all came to nothing because the homeless people that were brought in to the group were not allowed to register. The Wasco County clerks refused to allow them to register, probably under the fact that, I mean, yes, they were American citizens, so there's a very two-sided way you can look at this, that you are still denying a citizen their right to vote because they are homeless, but they're still American citizens. But they basically kind of like pulled the card of, well, you don't have an address, and you haven't lived here that long, so you can't register in this county because, they pulled the, bureaucracy formal kind of like, well, actually, you can't do that. So I think, again, was it well executed and well done? No, like none of this was on either side was done well. Like there was a lot of shady shit going on. So then they brought in all these homeless people, which unfortunately brought in some stuff, some other problems too, because you bring in homeless people, you bring in people that are either maybe sometimes drug addicted, sometimes have mental health issues, and they didn't have the wherewithal to prepare for this. So there were instances of violence and things like that would happen at the cult or the group compound after this happened, like after they brought these people in, and then it ended up being more than they could handle. And then let's see how they handle it, because they didn't handle it well. So let's find out. And eventually they were all released into the surrounding towns and cities. Most would be left to return to their home cities of their own accord, and ultimately the cost of this relocation fell on the state of Oregon itself. But where was Rajneesh himself in the midst of all the conflict? We'll get to where he was at in a second, but basically that's what happened. They took in all these people. Once the idea did not come to fruition and they were not able to vote, they basically started portioning them out and telling them to leave. Well, you're violent and you're causing problems and you have to go. So they were sending back all of these people that they had bussed in that now had nowhere to go and no way to get back to where they'd come from. So either they had to get there on their own dime, or basically the state of Oregon had to absorb all of that. And they were just like kind of like bussed out into Portland and dropped off and said like, you'll be in our thoughts, goodbye. And then they just kind of left them. So much for compassion, I suppose. Continue me. He lived on site at the ranch in a trailer next to a covered swimming pool and other amenities, most notable of which became his collection of Rolls-Royces, the fleet of luxury vehicles eventually numbering 93 in total. During this time of silence, he would interact with his followers via a, quote, drive-by ceremony, where he would wave at his gathered followers from the back seat of whatever Rolls-Royce he was being driven in on that day. Outside of the pre-recorded lectures, this was the only interaction the faithful at Rajneeshpuram would have with their leader. During the Oregon years, there was also an increased emphasis on Rajneesh's, quote, end-of-the-world predictions. He predicted that by the 1990s, the world would be destroyed by either nuclear war or other disasters. Rajneesh had said as early as 1964 that, quote, the third and last war is now on the way. And he frequently spoke of the need to create a new humanity to avoid global suicide. This is a typical tactic that cults and other high control groups will use. It's called I don't remember the exact name of it, but it's basically instilling a sense of urgency. You tell people the world is going to end, or you tell them that the end is near, the end is nigh, the world is coming to an end, things are going to happen, and terrible things are going to happen. So you constantly keep people in this state of emotional high alert, to the point that basically you're keeping people in a heightened sense of readiness, and they don't have an opportunity to logically think about things and reconsider things. They don't have that space. They're basically kind of kept in a constant state of panic, or of like something's going to happen. And it's a very common theme in a lot of cults, where it's a control tactic. You get people to do what you want and to bend to your will when they don't have a chance to think for themselves, when they don't have a chance to, sit and logically examine something you said. So if you keep people just like, oh my God, we better prepare, we have to do this, we have to do that, they don't sit and think about like, well, wait a minute, that doesn't make any good sense. So yeah, pretty common tactic. Also also side note, guys, I'm going all over the place today. There are, these compounds do still exist. They are still standing. The one in Antelope that was built as a side off when they took over the whole town, these houses, like the one you actually see right here, are still standing in Antelope, California, Antelope, Oregon. The compound is still standing. Most of the structures are still standing. They're just completely abandoned. As recently as 2018, I've seen people taking pictures of these A-frame homes, the Rajneesh compound, the Rajneesh housing that is outside of Antelope, Oregon. And it is creepy as heck to see. The ranch itself does still exist, but it was purchased by a multimillionaire developer named Daniel Washington. And he's a rancher from Montana. He purchased the ranch, the original The Big Muddy Ranch, after it was abandoned. And it's been turned into a Christian youth camp, which to me sounds just like another version of a cult. Did I say that out loud? Oh, weird. Continue. And yes, road trip, definitely. It's all still there. This now became the basis for a new exclusivity and a 1983 article in the Rajneesh Foundation newsletter announcing that, quote, Rajneeshism is creating a Noah's Ark of consciousness. I say to you that except this, there is no other way, unquote, which increased the sense of urgency in building the Oregon commune. Things escalated quickly, with tensions rising between locals and the commune, but they came to a terrifying climax in 1984. Rajneesh had coached Sheela in using media coverage to her advantage during his period of public silence, and he privately stated that when Sheela spoke, she was speaking on his behalf. He had also supported her when disputes about her behavior rose within the commune leadership, but in early 1984, as tension amongst the inner circle peaked, a private meeting was convened with Sheela and his personal house staff. According to the testimony of Rajneesh's dentist, Swami Devagit, she was admonished during a meeting, with Rajneesh declaring that his house, not hers, was the center of the commune. Devagit claimed Rajneesh warned that Sheela's jealousy of anyone close to him would inevitably make them a target. Several months later, on the 30th of October 1984, Rajneesh ended his period of public silence, announcing that it was, quote, time to speak his own truths, unquote. In July 1985, he resumed daily public discourses. On September 16, 1985, a few days after Sheela and her entire management team had suddenly left the commune for Europe, Rajneesh held a press conference in which he labeled Sheela and her associates a, quote, gang of fascists. He accused them of having committed serious crimes, most dating back to 1984, and he invited the authorities to investigate. Threw her under the bus? Yes, he fucking did. Yes, he 100% did. So at this time, according to Sheela, this was around when there was a Hollywood element that had joined to the cult. So they had gotten fairly popular amongst some rich people in Los Angeles and in Hollywood, and they had this Hollywood element that suddenly joined the group and were showering the Bhagwan with expensive gifts and diamond jewelry, which he loved all of that stuff. I mean, the man owned 90 fucking Rolls Royces. So there was this element that then came into that you could tell, did not care for, and she did not think that they had his best interests at heart. She claimed they started plying the Bhagwan with Valium, with drugs, basically just, being a bad influence overall. And she confronted him about the drug use because she saw this was detrimental, according to her, as to what was going on, that he wasn't in his right mind, that these people were a bad influence. And he basically told her to mind her own fucking business, to which she didn't take too kindly to that and decided to eventually leave. Unfortunately, not before taking a somewhat paranoid, psychotic turn, but we'll get there in a second. Continue me. The alleged crimes, which he stated had been committed without his knowledge or consent, included the attempted murder of his personal physician, poisonings of public officials, wiretapping within the commune and within his own home, and perhaps the pièce de résistance, the largest bioterror attack in U.S. history instigated against a small rural Oregon community in a futile attempt to influence a local election in favor of the Rajneeshi. Several months after the failed attempt to influence a local Wasco County election by bussing in homeless people, the group decided to escalate their attempts. Over the next 2 months, the group would contaminate 10 local salad bars with salmonella in order to suppress the locals turning out to vote. Using a plastic bag filled with a brown liquid that they glibly called salsa, they poured the salmonella-filled specimen into salad dressings, on produce, and utensils, basically anywhere they could find to put it. 750 people fell ill, and ultimately 45 were hospitalized. There were no fatalities, but using just salmonella was not the original plan hatched by the Rajneeshi. If they had carried out their original plan to use a different strain, Salmonella typhi, or typhoid fever, likely there would have been a much more fatal impact on the community. And while local businesses suffered due to the outbreak, with many local restaurants unable to rebound from such a health scare, it had the opposite effect on the polls. As if the locals knew that underhanded tactics were afoot, they in fact turned out in droves to vote, and not a single Rajneeshi candidate was elected. While his allegations were initially greeted with skepticism by outside observers, the subsequent investigation by U.S. authorities confirmed Rajneesh's accusations, even discovering a full-fledged bioterrorism lab at the Rajneeshpuram compound, along with literature on the manufacture of explosives and military biowarfare. They had drugs like you would not believe at this place too. Full-fledged lab. Not to mention the fact that when the compound was ultimately raided, the authorities discovered expansive secret bunkers beneath Sheela's living quarters, which is called, I think, the Jesus House, secret escape tunnels, and a massive wiretapping and recording operation that, to this day, still stands as one of the largest incidents of illegal wiretapping and surveillance in U.S. history. The attempt on the physician's life was an actual thing. That did actually happen on his physician. The Rajneesh had a personal physician, and it did seem like that anyone who got close to the Bhagwan while Sheela was there, anyone who tried to seem like kind of interfere with the bond that she and him had, or whatever, or had to try to have any kind of influence over him other than herself, kind of ultimately became public enemy number one. And she claims that the doctor was giving him drugs. That can be here nor there. This is all hearsay at this point. But she was claiming that the doctor was giving him drugs and had written out a will of like how peacefully to commit suicide if he needed to exit this world. So she was concerned that the Bhagwan's life was in danger. So under this immediate threat of him being possibly assassinated, she basically instructed one of her loyal followers, like basically her secretary, to go and kill the doctor, which she then did attempt to do. During a festival or this big gathering, she stuck him with a needle that she was provided from the drug lab, and he did get very sick. they started poisoning other people inside the commune, not to mention the people that they had already poisoned and attacked outside the commune. They started turning it internally because Sheela basically kind of just went off of her fucking nut and decided that everybody was out for blood, that that they had infiltrated the compound, and it was like bad. Like there were people that were getting poisoned in their food, their water. Nobody died that they know of. There were attempted deaths, not deaths that they could prove. But it got crazy there for a minute. Then suddenly, after all of this chaos, after the doctor was basically stuck with a drug and attempted to be killed, multiple people were drugged at the compound via their food and water. Anyone that came up there as far as authorities, because authorities were going back and forth at the same time also with attempts to try to deport the Bhagwan, because they claimed that he immigrated on false pretense, that he came for medical reasons and never sought medical treatment, that he did not stay on the visa he was told he was going to stay on, some things like that. So they attempted to kind of go back and forth. Anyone that would come up there authority-wise, basically they tried to poison, tried to attack. So she bounced. She and her people ultimately were like, you know what? He doesn't tell me to mind my own business. I've been running this place without him. She gets on a plane and she leaves and she dips with her people. Well, right after that, he immediately comes out and says, guess what this bitch did? And claimed that he had no knowledge of anything that she or her inner cadre did. I don't think I entirely believe that. I think he probably gave the silent seal of approval to all of these things, but then it was that convenient scapegoat, which is why he had the executive secretary to begin with, because it's somebody that you can then lay all the blame on if shit goes south. That's just my opinion. Continue me. That was a long one. These shocking discoveries resulted in the conviction of Sheela and several of her lieutenants. On the 30th of September 1985, Rajneesh denied that he was a religious teacher. His disciples burned 5,000 copies of the book Rajneeshism, an introduction to Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh and his religion, a 78-page compilation of his teachings that defined Rajneeshism as a, quote, religionless religion. He said he ordered the book burning to rid the sect of the last traces of the influence of Sheela, whose robes were also burned and added to the bonfire. The Salmonella attack is considered the first confirmed instance of chemical or biological terrorism to have occurred in the United States. Rajneesh stated that because he was in silence and isolation, meeting only with Sheela, he was unaware of the crimes committed by the Rajneeshpuram leadership until Sheela and her, quote, gang left and sannyasins came forward to inform him. Conversely, a number of commentators have stated that they believe that Sheela was being used as a convenient scapegoat. Others have pointed to the fact that although Sheela had bugged Rajneesh's living quarters and made her tapes available to the U.S. authorities as part of her own plea bargain, no sufficient evidence has ever come to light that Rajneesh had any part in her crimes. Nevertheless, reports state that Charles Turner, David Frohnmeyer, and other law enforcement officials who had read affidavits that were never released publicly, and who listened to hundreds of hours of tape recordings, insinuated that Rajneesh was guilty of more crimes than those for which he was eventually prosecuted. Frohnmeyer asserted that Rajneesh's philosophy was not, quote, disapproving of poisoning, and that he felt that he and Sheela had been, quote, genuinely evil. Nonetheless, U.S. Attorney Turner and Attorney General Frohnmeyer acknowledged that, quote, they had little evidence of Rajneesh being involved in any of the criminal activities that unfolded at the ranch, unquote. And boy, there were a lot. It also came to light that amongst various instances of assault and attempted murder, like I said before, at the ranch, there had actually been a sophisticated series of assassination plots hatched against important government officials, like Dave Frohnmeyer, who was the, I believe he was a state's prosecutor in Oregon, and Charles Turner, who was the U.S. attorney in the state of Oregon. Weapons that were acquired for the task by a hit squad were left at a lake near the compound, but abandoned when the plots eventually did fall through. And one gun was actually eventually recovered by a Navy dive team once the compound was raided. So they were really seriously, and this was like, this had escalated obviously to the point of, I mean, yeah, they're both very culpable. You guys are absolutely right. They're both very culpable, and they're both very like accountable to this. This could have gone really wrong. So we're getting to the point of like, we're almost at flashpoint escalation here, you guys. Like, seriously, let me recap here. There we go. Sorry, I was just having to adjust a window. Let's get back to it. Continue, me. Let's see how worse this could possibly get. According to testimony by Ma Ava, a prominent disciple, Sheela played associates a tape recording of a meeting she had with Rajneesh about the, quote, need to kill people to strengthen wavering sannyasin's resolve in participating in her murderous plots, but it was difficult to hear. So Sheela produced a transcript of the tape. Quote, she came back to the meeting and began to play the tape. It was a little hard to hear what he was saying, but Parambodhi assisted her and transcribed it, and the gist of Bhagwan's response, yes, it was going to be necessary to kill people to stay in Oregon, and that actually killing people wasn't such a bad thing, and actually Hitler was a great man, although he could not say that publicly because nobody would understand that. Hitler had great vision. Unquote. Ma Ava also said in her testimony to the FBI investigators that, quote, Sheela informed them that Bhagwan was not to know about what was going on, and that if Bhagwan were to ask them about anything that would occur, they would have to lie to Bhagwan, unquote. Sheela initiated attempts to murder Rajneesh's caretaker and girlfriend, Ma Yoga Vivek, and his personal physician, Swami Devaraj, because she thought they were a threat to Rajneesh. She had secretly recorded a conversation between Devaraj and Rajneesh, quote, in which the doctor agreed to obtain drugs the guru wanted to ensure a peaceful death if he ever decided to take his own life, unquote. On October 23, 1985, a federal grand jury indicted Rajneesh and several other disciples with conspiracy to evade immigration laws. Negotiations to allow Rajneesh to surrender to authorities in Portland if a warrant were issued ultimately came to nothing, and rumors of a takeover by the National Guard and a planned violent arrest of Rajneesh led to tension and fears of shooting. Tension and fears of shooting does not even begin to scratch the surface of that one, guys, because let's recap for briefly, shall we? You've got a group that at this point is highly armed. Had somebody in there that was paranoid, that basically stirred up paranoia amongst the followers. The followers were, and some still are, ultimately dedicated to the preservation of this group and to the safety of their guru. They've been training for hours and hours a day with guns and rifles and shooting. They've instigated a bioterror attack against people they felt were a threat to them. And now you've got the very real possibility that the National Guard will come in and raid the compound and take and arrest Osho. This was about this far from turning into Waco, you guys. Like, it was about this far. Like, this came so close to being a disaster. It's shocking that it didn't, and the only reason it didn't is coming up right now. Like, there is, by any measure of history, this was an unavoidable, like, this were like two boulders heading towards each other. This one is an unavoidable conflict. And this was going to be a very ugly standoff, if not a complete bloodbath on either end. But it didn't happen. And let's find out why it didn't happen. Continue, me. On the strength of Sheela's tape recordings, authorities later said they believed that there had been a plan that sannyasin women and children would have been asked to create a human shield if authorities tried to arrest Rajneesh at the commune. On October 28, 1985, Rajneesh and a small number of followers accompanying him were intercepted and arrested aboard a rented Learjet at a North Carolina airstrip. According to federal authorities, the group was preparing to leave for Bermuda in order to avoid prosecution. $58,000 in cash, as well as 35 watches and bracelets worth a combined $1 million, were found on the aircraft. Rajneesh had, by all accounts, been informed neither of the impending arrest nor the reason for the journey. Sorry to cut myself off, but I don't know if I entirely buy that he wasn't aware, because apparently when the authorities raided the plane, he was hiding behind a plane seat and was coaxed to come out by federal authorities, by a federal agent. Yeah, he just bounced. He left, you guys. That is the literal only reason that the raid on the compound did not happen, was because I guess he basically consulted with his lawyers and they were like, this could go one of two ways. They're not allowing you to surrender yourself, to voluntarily surrender. They want the perp walk. They want you in cuffs. So they're going to get that one way or the other. So I guess he ultimately decided that he was just going to leave. And he just got on the plane at like 5:30 in the morning. They saw the planes leave and just took off. And we're booking it to Bermuda, which, for two reasons. Bermuda has decent weather and has a pretty nice environment. And plus, there's no extradition law. So he would have been immune from extradition back to the United States to answer for crimes that he was wanted for, that the indictment was for. So, yeah. Like, that is the only reason that this shit did not go south really quickly, is because he took his and went, gotta go, I'm out, and then basically just left everyone, did not tell anyone he was leaving. The mayor of the town, who's on the documentary quite a bit, he didn't even know. Like, nobody knew. They just got on the plane and just bounced and boogie-oogie-oogied and left everybody. So all the followers were like, what the actual fuck is happening? Like, they were all kind of left in like this very like, what do we do now kind of thing. And so it gets crazier. There's more. There's more. We're not done. It took the full 10 days legally available to transfer him from North Carolina to Portland for arraignment. After initially pleading not guilty to all charges and being released on bail, Rajneesh, on the advice of his lawyers, entered an Alford plea, a guilty type of plea which the suspect does not admit guilt, but does concede that there is enough evidence to convict him. He pleaded guilty to one count of having concealed intent to remain permanently in the United States at the time of his original visa application in 1981, and one count of having conspired to have sannyasins enter into false marriages in order to acquire U.S. residency. Under the deal his lawyers made with the U.S. Attorney's Office, he was given a 10-year suspended sentence, 5 years probation, and $400,000 penalties and fines and prosecution costs, and he agreed to leave the United States, not returning for at least 5 years, without the permission of the U.S. Attorney General. Following his sudden exit from the U.S., Rajneesh returned to India in November of 1985. He was given a hero's welcome by his Indian disciples and denounced the United States, saying the world must, quote, put the monster America in its place, unquote, and that, quote, either America must be hushed up or America will be the end of the world, unquote. When the non-Indians in his party had their visas revoked, he moved on to Kathmandu, Nepal, and then a few weeks later to Crete. Arrested after a few days by the Greek National Intelligence Service, he flew to Geneva, then to Stockholm and London, but in each case was refused entry. Canada would also refuse landing permissions, so his plane returned to Shannon Airport in Ireland to refuel. There he was allowed to stay for 2 weeks at a hotel in Limerick on condition that he did not go out or give talks. He had been granted a Uruguayan identity card, 1-year provisional residency, and a possibility of permanent residency, so the party set out, stopping in Madrid, where the plane was surrounded by the Guardia Civil. In Uruguay, the group moved to a house where Rajneesh began speaking publicly until June 19th, after which he was, quote, invited to leave for no official reason. A 2-week visa was arranged for Jamaica, but on arrival in Kingston, police gave the group 12 hours to leave. After nearly a year of attempting to find a new place to settle, Rajneesh returned to Bombay, India on 30th of July, 1986. In January of 1987, Rajneesh returned to the ashram in Pune, where he held evening discourses each day, except when interrupted by intermittent bouts of ill health. Publishing and therapy resumed, and the ashram underwent expansion, now as a, quote, multiversity, where therapy was to function as a bridge to meditation. Rajneesh devised new meditation therapy methods such as mystic rose, and began to lead meditations in his discourses after a gap of more than 10 years. His Western disciples formed no large communes, preferring ordinary independent living, and the former dress codes for followers of red and orange garments paired with mala beads were largely abandoned. The wearing of maroon robes only while on ashram premises was reintroduced in the summer of 1989, along with white robes worn for evening meditation and black robes for group leaders. In November 1987, Rajneesh expressed his belief that his deteriorating health, symptoms of nausea, fatigue, pain in extremities, and lack of resistance to infection, was due to poisoning by the United States authorities while he was in prison. His doctors and former attorney, Philip Toklas, otherwise known as Swami Prem Niran, hypothesized possible radiation or thallium poisoning due to a deliberately irradiated mattress, since the symptoms were concentrated on the right side of his body, but could present no hard evidence. Yeah, I don't necessarily buy that. He was in already terrible health when he left India the first time in 1981. He had diabetes, he had various allergies, he had all kinds of health concerns. And then by like 86, 87, he was not a young man either. So his health was just, I think, naturally declining, because that can happen without being poisoned by the government. But I don't know. That's a whole tinfoil hat thing that I don't necessarily want to get. Yeah. You're not one of the Russian expatriates that got stabbed by a poison umbrella, dude. Calm down. That's a whole other story. That is the school in, this is Antelope, Oregon. It currently, I guess as of, I don't know about currently, but as of the 2010 census, had 46 people living in Antelope, Oregon. Most places are closed. It's basically virtually a ghost town at this point. That is the old school that was built in the 1800s. It was used up until the time of the Rajneesh, and then it's been abandoned ever since. So I really want to go in it. Like, this place is a calling my name. Seriously. And thank you, Polly, for throwing the link out there. Thank you, Tamara, for the PayPal donation. Again, donations are not necessary, but they are certainly appreciated, you guys, because this stuff, like, we're doing all this is not cheap always. So it's always appreciated. The help is always appreciated. Thank you so much. I love you guys. U.S. Attorney Charles H. Hunter described this as, quote, complete fiction. From early 1988, Rajneesh discourses focused exclusively on Zen. In late December, he said he no longer wished to be referred to as Bhagwan Sri Rajneesh, and in February 1989 took the name Osho Rajneesh, which shortened to Osho in September. He also requested that all trademarks previously branded with Rajneesh be rebranded Osho. His health still continued to weaken. He delivered his last public discourse in April of 1989, from then on simply sitting in silence with his followers. Shortly before his death, Rajneesh suggested that one or more audience members at evening meetings, quote, now referred to as the White Robe Brotherhood, were subjecting him to some form of evil magic. A search for the perpetrators was undertaken, but none could be found. Rajneesh died on January 19, 1990, age 58, at the ashram in Pune. The official cause of death was heart failure, but a statement released by the commune said that he died because, quote, living in the body had become a hell, unquote, after an alleged poisoning in U.S. jails. His ashes were placed in his newly built bedroom in Lao Tzu House at the ashram in Pune. Never one to shy away from controversy, even in death, the enigmatic epitaph reads, quote, never born, never died, only visited this planet Earth between December 11th, 1931 and January 19th, 1990, unquote. I would like my epitaph to say, never born, never died, only cheese. And just leave people going, what the fuck does that mean? What in the extra crispy, crunchy fuck does that mean? Yeah, I show the grave here in a second, but this is an actual photo. So the photos you were just shown are as of 2018. That was Antelope, Oregon. This is a fairly recent photo of the ashram, the Pune, in ashram in Pune, which is now Osho International. It is a multi-million-dollar complex, you guys. I'm not making this stuff up. Here we go. Yes. Never born, never died, only cheese. So dramatic and such a head scratcher. While Rajneesh's teachings were not welcomed by many in his own home country during his lifetime, there has been a change in Indian public opinion since Rajneesh's death. Rajneesh has found more acclaim in his homeland since his death than he ever did while he was alive. Writing in the Indian Express, columnist Tanveer Alam stated, quote, "The late Rajneesh was a fine interpreter of social absurdities that destroyed human happiness," unquote. Over 650 books are credited to Rajneesh, expressing his views on all facets of human existence. Virtually all of them are renderings of his taped discourses. His books are available in more than 60 languages from more than 200 publishing houses and have entered bestseller lists all around the world. Rajneesh continues to be known and published worldwide in the area of meditation, and his work also includes social and political commentary. Internationally, after almost 2 decades of controversy and a decade of accommodation, Rajneesh's movement has established itself in the market of new religions. His followers have redefined his contributions, reframing central elements of his teaching so as to make them appear less controversial to outsiders. The Osho International Foundation, or OIF, now runs stress management seminars for corporate clients such as IBM and BMW, with a reported revenue between $15 and $45 million annually in the United States. Rajneesh's original ashram in Pune has transformed itself from the once madhouse carnival of the esoteric into the ostensibly more palatable Osho International Meditation Resort. Describing itself as the, quote, SLN of the East, it teaches a variety of spiritual techniques from a broad range of traditions and promotes itself as a spiritual oasis, a sacred space for discovering oneself and uniting the desires of the body and mind in a beautiful resort environment. According to press reports, prominent visitors have included politicians and media personalities. Ma'anand Sheela was originally sentenced to 3 separate 20-year terms in federal prison for her role in the Oregon bioterror attack, but only served 29 months before being released for good behavior. She now resides in Switzerland. The Rajneeshi movement does still exist today in small pockets around the world. Can't get enough of the hive mind? Join me next time for a deep dive into the tragic inside story of false prophets, sex, and death under Texas skies, the saga of David Koresh and the Branch Davidian compound in Waco. And we're back with audio this time. There I am. Yeah, so basically that's how you go from, cult leader to new age guru, I guess, with, your followers kind of tidying up the lesser shiny parts of your image and repackaging it to be more palatable for mass audiences. But that stuff still happened. All of that still happened. And it is still one of the major, I think the first major instance of bioterrorism that happened on US soil. Still. Yeah, cult status to religion only took 50 years. Pretty much. It was a whole circus of crazy. The movement is still active, like I said in the video. It's a much smaller degree. There are still people who follow his teachings. who still visit the ashram every year, the Osho International Resort. And like I said, they teach courses to businesses, to corporations, stress relief and stuff like that. So that's how you get, you get whitewashed, you get mainstream. That's how this sort of thing happens. So when I worked at a bookstore for a very long period of time, so whenever people would come in looking for the Osho books, because a lot of times they get recommended on like daytime television, on like Oprah, on Dr. Phil, on things like this, as this, this granola crunchy new age kind of self-improvement sort of thing that became very popular on daytime television. I just kind of would always chuckle because nobody knew the background of this guy. They just knew him as this smiling, kindly looking guru man on the book. Had no idea. So I would just kind of give him a chuckle while I handed them the book, and probably always left them wondering, why is that weird girl chuckling at me? Well, because you don't know. Because you don't. Thank you for everybody for joining. Yeah, the Hare Krishna. Hare Krishna are fun. Well, they're just kind of, aren't they the nice people at the airport that just hand you flowers and dance with tambourines and stuff like that? I have to look into them some more. So I'm sure there's something weird there. There's always something weird with a lot of things. Stress relief orgies, maybe. Thank you guys for joining. Yeah, and I don't know if it's going to be next week. I know I don't love this 2 weeks schedule thing. But it allows me more time to research and bring you a much more comprehensive picture of the group. I also remember watching the Waco raid on television live when that happened. So this is going to be an interesting one. So basically the breaking down of the Rajneeshpuram compound was possibly the best case scenario that could have happened. Now, next time, we're going to look at the worst case scenario of how this could and did, and everything went wrong. Because these were basically like very parallel situations with the same sort of things being said, the same kind of paranoia, the same kind of arming, the same kind of stuff. One went well, one didn't. So let's look at why and how. And David Koresh, Vernon. Okay, no wonder he changed his name, nerd. Yes, thank you guys for watching. So I appreciate all of you. I don't know if it's going to be next week, but of course you'll get the notification. Make sure you hit that bell so you get all the notifications. We're going to be working on some more things, and as soon as the cult series is over, we'll get back to serial killers. I figure we'll do a couple more. I haven't even touched Scientology yet, y'all. So wait till we get that one. I'm probably going to get doxxed. I don't really care at this point. So keep you guys. There's only probably I'd say a couple more episodes in the cult saga, unless you want me to keep going. We'll hit all the ones. We'll hit Waco for sure, obviously. We'll hit Scientology. We're going to go over... I think there's at least one more that I wanted to go over. And then we're going to end it probably on Manson because it's going to dovetail nicely back into our true crime. So thank you guys for watching. Thank you. All the little hearts. I love to see that. So without further ado, that is how we're pronouncing it now. There's nothing you can do about it. Resistance is futile. That wasn't culty to say at all. No. I will try to join the Zoom tomorrow night. I can't guarantee you, but I will try. Absolutely. So thank you guys for joining. Thank you again. And I will catch you next time with a just as complicated story, just as crazy story. These hurt my brain, y'all, but it's worth it. So stay spooky. Don't join a cult. And don't get murdered. See you guys later.